Welcome to Salute Your Sports Week 10. Common Enchev, Tom Castleman, Drew Brackett. An exciting week of sports to talk about. A lot of really good things happening in the NFL. Of course, we got college football conference championships. We're going to preview college basketball conference season. And we're going to talk a little bit about the best players in the NBA, locks of the week, statements of the week, all that and more. Guys, you pretty excited?
Very excited, and we're going to have, at least on my part, a little bit of griping to do at the College Football Playoff Committee with how they're choosing to do some things. So definitely a lot of great content to get into today.
Yeah, should be a great show.
All righty, well, we're going to kick it off. We're going to talk about the AFC. What a crazy conference. We spent a lot of time talking about the NFC this year and how the best team is any given week it changes. We haven't really done that in the AFC as much. I think it's safe to say the Chiefs are the team to beat. What we're going to discuss is who could give the Chiefs the most trouble. We had the Bills had that big 25-16 win over the Steelers. We had the Ravens holding off the Browns 47-42 in the game of the year. The Colts dominate the Raiders 44-27. A very bunched up AFC. We've got three teams that are 9-4, Browns, Colts, and Titans. We've got the Bills, who are 10-3. The Steelers are 11-2. And, of course, the Dolphins and Ravens fighting it out for the playoff spot. The Raiders still in there, barely. With that said, guys, who is the second best team in the AFC, or maybe not even the second best team matchup-wise? Who's the team that could really push the Chiefs out of the AFC?
Yeah, it really kind of comes down to how you decide to parse that question, because for me, my answer for the best matchup against the Chiefs is not the team that I necessarily think is the second best team in the AFC. I'm going to go with the Indianapolis Colts as being a really good matchup, because if you look at the games in which the Chiefs have struggled this year, it's against good defenses and it's against teams that can keep them off the field. Indianapolis Colts have one of the best defenses in the NFL. Especially in big games, they seem to turn it on for the big-time opponents when they need to. And on the offensive side of the football, they have one of the best offensive lines, and that goes up against one of Kansas City's few weaknesses, which is they don't really have a great pass rush. So with the offensive line, you can control the passing game, you can control the running game, which then keeps Patrick Mahomes off the field. Of course, that's if the Colts are able to put it all together in one game, and we've seen, they've lost to Jacksonville, they've lost to Tennessee, picked up a couple other losses. The Colts don't always put it together, but when they do, if they're firing on all cylinders, I think they're the best team, the team with the best chance to take down Kansas City this year.
Before I go to Drew real quickly, so the Colts are the best chance. Who do you think is the second best team?
Second best team, I would probably say, is Pittsburgh. I know that they're in a really rough stretch now, but I think that if you get them to the end of the season, give them time to get amped up for the playoffs, get a little bit healthy, if they can maybe sneak back into that one seed. They just have to figure a couple of things out, but they have really good defense as well, and they need to figure out the running game. But I'd say they're probably the second best team.
Drew, what do you think?
Yeah, I tend to agree with Tom with the Colts, but you don't want to overlook the Buffalo Bills. That Josh Allen and company playing really well this season. The defense has been okay. They're plus 38 on the point differential. So, Buffalo could give them a shot, especially if Josh Allen and that run game is on, especially the addition of Stephon Diggs. He's a really good number one receiver for them and has done well this season. So give me the Bills to possibly give the Chiefs a run for their money.
And they're also the second best team in the AFC. Would you say then, Drew?
Probably. I'm curious about Pittsburgh. I mean, they've lost 2 in a row after starting the season 11-2. Are they going to get back to form here before the playoffs, or are they just going to continue losing into the playoff wild card weekend?
Well, so first off, I will have an answer that tells you that I don't think any team matches up well with the Chiefs out of the AFC. I do have a team out of the NFC that matches up well with the Chiefs. Tom, you talked about the formula to beat the Chiefs. You need a good defense, and you need a run game to keep Mahomes off the field. while the Colts, I will say, are a very good defense, they're particularly good against the run. They are not as good against the pass, which the Chiefs are the number one passing offense. So the Colts are 13th against the pass, by the way, so barely above average, given the fact that they've been up in some games. So 13th, not that impressive. I'm going to go ahead and read off some of these teams in the AFC where they rank against the pass, which gives you a ton of concern if you're these AFC teams. The Bills, they're 19th against the pass. The Colts are 13th. The Browns are 20th. The Dolphins are 18th. The Ravens are 16th. And the Raiders are 25th. So none of those teams are good matchups. The only team that is good against the pass out of the AFC is the Steelers, who are number 2. However, the Steelers are number 31 in the NFL rush offense. And they've been worst. If you take out a few weeks early in the season, the last few weeks they've been by far the worst running team in the NFL. They don't even try to run the ball. They run straight out of shotgun. They do a shotgun with Roethlisberger, and they have 4 guys. So none of these teams really match up that well against Kansas City. A few other teams that run the ball well, the Browns. But the Browns' defense is really, really poor, and poor against the pass in the bottom half of the league. The Ravens are a great run team, middle of the pack pass defense, and we saw them struggle a lot against Baker Mayfield and the Browns, who aren't even necessarily a great passing team. We've seen the Ravens struggle a lot against the Chiefs. Lamar Jackson 0-3 against them. The Bills, we saw that matchup earlier this year. Certainly Josh Allen is playing much better. However, they lost at home by 9 against the Chiefs. And the Bills have a pretty poor running game. They're 22nd in rush offense. They basically are similar to the Chiefs. They're a pass offense, but they do it worse than Kansas City. Not a very good matchup. If they can get the running game going, the Steelers are the best matchup. I would say another matchup possibly is the Colts, like you mentioned. But if I had to pick one, I would go with the Titans right now. Again, not necessarily the second best team. The second best team are the Bills, and the Steelers could be second best if they figure out their running game. But I would say the Titans, their issue with the Titans is they're 29th in pass defense, so they're not going to stop Mahomes guarding him. But what they can do is they're number 2 in the NFL rush offense. They have the best running back in the NFL in Derrick Henry. I know this is going back to last year. The Chiefs' defense is better than last year, but they're very similar. The one area where they struggle a little bit is run defense. You look at their ranks this season, they're 14th against the pass and 26th against the run. And when you really take a deeper look into that, they're up a lot. A lot of teams pass the ball on the Chiefs. So they really are probably better against the pass and worse against the run in those statistics. So we had Tennessee beat the Chiefs last year, and then they led them in the AFC title game, and they have a 4th scoring offense. They can keep up with Kansas City a little bit, and they can run the ball. That, to me, would be the toughest matchup. But I really don't see the Chiefs losing to any of these teams. I mean, obviously the Raiders have played them well, but I'm not too sure the Raiders will even get in the playoffs most likely. So for me, the surprise pick there would be the Titans.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that in all of our picks we said if they can figure certain things out, if they can do this right,
Sure.
That's what it really takes against a Kansas City team that really, they've had some down moments, but they haven't shown any wholesale weaknesses across the board for any of the team. And anything that they have, they're able to paper up with, probably the best player in the NFL. Depending on, if you want to go by MVP award or not. We talked about that a little bit last week, but there's no doubt that if he's not the MVP, he's the second best player in the league. So having Patrick Mahomes covers up.
Receiver to go.
What's up?
With pretty good tight end and receiver in Kelsey.
Right, for sure. Yeah, no, you're able to cover up a lot of things if you're able to put up a bunch of yards like that. So the true trick will be, how many defenses can turn touchdowns into field goals, because everything between the 20s is exercise as far as I'm concerned. When it gets to the red zone area of the field, if you can make Harrison Butker be a bigger part of the game than some of these other weapons, you're doing pretty well for yourself. But certainly tall timber for anybody coming out of that AFC.
Yeah, real quick stat. So there's no team in the AFC that ranks in the top 10 in pass defense and run offense. No team in the AFC.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the way to beat the Chiefs. I think the Raiders beat them earlier this year. That was a really uncharacteristic game. The Colts gave up some deep shots, but their corners have actually been very good. So the formula that you look for, I don't really think a team truly exists there out of the AFC. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting. But if there is a team that exists to beat the Chiefs, it's the New Orleans Saints. This is the toughest matchup the Chiefs have in the entire National Football League, and they're going to play together this Sunday, and it's in New Orleans. What do you guys think? Chiefs or Saints? And we're still waiting on Drew Brees, whether he'll play or not. He has been activated, though, so he could technically play.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm the Saints. I don't know if I activate or if I play Drew Brees in this game. I think a completely healthy Taysom Hill is better than a rusty Drew Brees for the Saints. So it's going to be a heck of a game. That's the Sunday? I think that's at. I don't think that's a Sunday night game. Yeah, of course, Browns Giants is. But Chiefs undefeated on the road this season, so obviously they're the favorite heading into New Orleans, but if the New Orleans defense can get to Patrick Mahomes, force him to make some difficult throws, you never know what can happen. But speaking of a running game, Alvin Kamara is one of the best there is. Taysom Hill, he kind of, he runs better than he throws. So it's going to be an interesting dynamic in that matchup on Sunday.
Yeah, and you can't forget about Latavius Murray, who, while he is, the second running back, they use him pretty often along with Alvin Kamara because Kamara is also really, really impactful in their passing game. And, I think, Taysom Hill is playing pretty well. I think that, he's had pretty much 3 fairly easy games, going up against the Falcons twice and the Broncos once, and that was when the Broncos didn't really have a quarterback, so Taysom Hill didn't have to do all that much for the Saints to win the game. I think this will be the first really, really big test to see how he does playing against not necessarily a great defense, but if you're trying to have to play, catch up with the Chiefs all day, that's going to show some things too. I think that the Saints would be wise to keep Drew Brees on the sidelines. He's coming back from, I think it was like 11 cracked or broken ribs and a punctured lung. That's the sort of thing where I would consider just shutting him down until maybe the last week of the season if you want to get him some snaps to kind of warm up for the playoffs, especially if you have that first round bye. But I certainly don't want to put him out there with, the Chiefs pass rush pinning their ears back and going after him. I want him for the playoffs, and the Saints have clinched the playoffs. So I think they'd be wiser to go with Taysom Hill and just kind of see what they have there.
Yeah, I probably agree with you guys on that. Real quick note, they are in trouble when it comes to that bye. Now the Packers took over in the NFC. They have the tiebreaker, and, of course, New Orleans plays the Chiefs. So they're in big trouble when it comes to that. I do think he needs some snaps before the playoffs, so I think
for sure
he does play the last week of the season. But they just activated him. This just happened. So this may not be the best spot for him. Also, I think against most teams in the NFL, Drew Brees is the clear pick over Taysom Hill. But we did mention that the Chiefs are pretty good against the pass, and they struggle against the run. Taysom Hill is kind of a big runner, so it's almost like matchup-wise actually almost makes sense to keep him in there. I gave you all those stats about how no team is good against the pass and good running. Well, the Saints are 4th in pass defense in the NFL, and they're 7th in rush offense. And that's the only team that has those type of numbers where they're top 7 in both categories. So the Saints on paper should be the toughest matchup for Kansas City. The line is about a field goal. I think that's fair. Obviously, if Kansas City puts it all together, it would not surprise me to see Kansas City blow them out. But we've seen Kansas City play a lot of close games in recent weeks. And it's one of those things where when they really need to score, they can turn it on. We kind of feel to flip the switch. That's what they do. But I do think that this probably will be close. It's a tough matchup for Kansas City. If Kansas City wins this game, though, it really does show you that really the NFL is in big trouble. Because I think this is kind of a spot where you're catching Kansas City no longer in a must-win. Should they lose this game, by the way, they would still hold the tiebreaker over the Steelers. because it's an out-of-division loss, and they do common opponents. And the Steelers lost to the Bills. The Chiefs beat the Bills. So this game, in a way, really isn't that important to Kansas City. Obviously, they want to beat New Orleans and make a statement, but this isn't sort of a must-win. The Saints are coming off a pretty bad loss against the Eagles. Certainly, Philly played very well that game. It was a close game, and they played better the second half. I would say they had a bad first half, New Orleans did. But I kind of like Kansas City in this one, but I think it's going to be a little bit closer. Usually I'm the guy that's all aboard Kansas City. Oh, the Chiefs are going to win. It's all KC. If there's a game they lose, this could be this one. I will say this, though. Patrick Mahomes in the Dome, that's scary. Also, the Chiefs are 7-0 on the road, and they had a better road record last year. So the fact that New Orleans is at home doesn't really matter that much to me. I would say if they had a full-packed stadium, where they allowed fans fully in and they could pack it in with all those fans, maybe then it makes a marginal difference. But in this scenario, I think Kansas City are pretty safe to win this game, and at least pretty safe to go 14-1. I don't know, maybe the last week, if they clinch the bye, they rest their guys the last week, possibly. But I expect a good game for sure. Watch that game at 3:25, not 7.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's in the primetime spot, I think, on Fox. I don't think that's on CBS. Just kind of like wrap it up for me. I think Chiefs will probably pull out the win as well. I think. Okay, so I'm messing up the stat in my head. I don't know if it's against the spread or if it's straight up. But prior to last week's games, home team is 500. It literally does not matter. It's a coin flip when it comes down to, does the home team win, does the road team win? In this current NFL, with a large enough sample size, we're seeing that home field advantage doesn't really exist without the fans there. It makes a little bit of sense, with who's traveling and that sort of thing. But, home field advantage, kind of like you're saying, doesn't really matter all that much in the NFL. So I have no problem saying that Chiefs will win. I think the field goal line that it is pretty close to accurate. It wouldn't surprise me if it was as high as a touchdown. It should be a good game all around.
Drew, what's your pick?
Yeah, if there was a crowd in New Orleans, I think I'd pick the Saints, but I think I have to side with the Chiefs on this one. It's very much a toss-up game. You just never know how they're going to react off the Eagles' loss. That's a really tough loss because the Eagles were not looking good at all, and they're starting a rookie quarterback. I think Hurts is a rookie. And that's a tough situation. So we'll see how they react coming off that loss.
Well, you let it in. I don't know if you did it on purpose, but you basically transitioned into
Of course he did.
Next question. Of course he did. The king of transition. Jalen Hurts got the start against the Saints, winning 24-21 against the Saints, who had the best record in the NFC. He wasn't sacked when Wentz was the most sacked QB. Only 167 pass yards, but one touchdown, didn't turn the ball over. He had 106 rush yards, and also they had another running back. The running back went over 100 rush yards. The Eagles with a huge 24-21 win. That leaves the question with Carson Wentz. Are they going to go back to him? Are they not? One of the questions regarding that is the contract that Wentz has. It's a pretty poor contract. I'm going to have Contract Castleman break this down because he's the expert on the contracts. I don't know very much about the cap, and I'm not going to pretend like I know how the cap works. So we're going to let the resident expert break down Wentz's contract before we go into details with what we think about it.
I'll do the best that I can. I put the notes on my phone for reference. To be clear, I'm not a capologist either. There are some things that as I was reading up on it, the professional journalists that are writing this up are saying we don't fully understand the cap either. It's a weird, wacky thing. So with Carson Wentz, he has a $59.2 million cap hit, again, a cap penalty against the Eagles if they cut him within the first 3 days of the new league's year starting, which is in March, and designate him as a post-June 1 release. That allows them to spread that cap hit out over 2 years. So if they cut him, it's $59.2 million, which is going to be about 1/3 of the cap next year. So there is no chance that the Philadelphia Eagles are going to cut him. If they cut him post June 1, that means that they can pay the cap hit that they were supposed to pay him for this year, with the rest of the money then coming next year. So that allows them to spread that out a little bit as opposed to just having to pay it all up front at once. If they try to trade him, they have a $33.8 million cap hit, which is about a sixth or so of the salary cap for next year. So if they trade him, about 1/6 of their salary cap will be dead money that they can't spend on other players. So they're really in a tight spot with Carson Wentz for the next 2 years contractually.
Is it 2 years left that he has left on his deal?
No, he has much more than 2 years. It's just the first 2 years are going to be the hardest penalties, and after the 2 years is where I think the guaranteed money drops off, and then they can cut him.
I thought I wrote it down, but maybe I didn't. Is it 4 years that he has left?
It's like a 4 or 5 year extension that I think started this year, or it starts next year. It's one of the two, but he's really early in the extension and playing pretty poorly. It's a really bad thing for the Eagles.
So what should they do? What do you think? What do you guys think that they should do with him? They're kind of stuck in no man's land.
That's a tough one. Go ahead, Tom.
I mean, I'm pretty sure Carson Wentz is just going to be out for the year unless Jalen Hurts gets hurt. Doug Peterson, I believe, has officially gone to Hurts as his starting quarterback this upcoming weekend. So I don't really see a good way that they can go back to Wentz. I mean, you win a game with Hurts, you're still, believe it or not, in the playoff hunt in that putrid NFC East. So I think that he's going to be the backup for the rest of this season, but I think he will have the chance, he'll have an opportunity to get his job back next year. The Eagles have been a mess with wide receiver injuries and poor play on the offensive line. He just hasn't looked comfortable all year. So I think that they'll put in the more mobile quarterback, they'll see what they have in Jalen Hurts, and then they'll reassess after training camp next year to determine the best steps moving forward for that situation.
Yeah, and really, who knows what's going on with Carson Wentz? But if you're paying him that much money, you talked about the contract. I mean, you got to find a way to get him right. And if it's shutting him down for this season, and maybe because of the COVID stuff, maybe there's something going on with him. But you've got to get him right. So shut him down, and if Jalen Hurts doesn't get hurt, continue to play Jalen Hurts, and once the season ends, figure it out.
So the thing about Carson Wentz that isn't maybe talked about that much is he's had a few injuries the last couple of years, and that's kind of hurt his mobility. He's not necessarily a great runner, but he's a solid runner. Mm-hmm. We haven't seen him run as much as he used to. He's not escaping as many sacks as he used to. But that's kind of weird, though, that's also translated to inaccuracy. We do talk about the fact that he's got a terrible offensive line. He's got terrible wide receivers. However, there's statistics out there that show that he has the most misses of open receivers in the NFL, worst passes 15 yards down the field. There's all sorts of stats they show in the games. So even when he's given time and has the ability to make plays, he hasn't made them. Jalen Hurts right now clearly is better for that Eagles system because their line is so bad. They need a quarterback that can escape sacks, which Jalen Hurts has been able to do. I think what they do is I kind of agree with Tom. You give Jalen Hurts the rest of this year to find out if he's your guy. What becomes really interesting, though, is if Jalen Hurts doesn't play that well and they decide he's not their guy, do they consider drafting a quarterback in next year's draft given Carson Wentz's contract? Because they could get a pretty low pick, and it's a very good quarterback class this year.
I mean, the only way that really works is if you do like a late, 5th, 6th, 7th, or undrafted type of guy, because you've already put so many resources. You have the contract for Carson Wentz, and then Jalen Hurts was, I believe, a second-round pick in his previous draft. You've already tied up so many resources into that one position, and you have so many more holes on this team that you have to try to fill. I could see them taking a late-round flyer on a developmental guy, sure. But I think the most likely course of action is they'll have, Jalen Hurts, Carson Wentz kind of battle it out with hopefully a full off season with a full training camp and OTAs and all those good activities that really help get everybody in sync, and then just kind of go from there and figure out, can you recapture some of that 2017 magic Carson Wentz had when he was probably going to be the MVP before tearing his ACL? Do you see, okay, Jalen Hurts, you've gotten a taste of NFL action. Maybe year 2, you'll be much more prepared for the speed of the game. I think that's the more likely course of action. I can't see them within any of their top picks or anything like that doing anything for quarterback, though.
No, I don't think you want to spend a pick on a quarterback when you have Jalen Hurts. You can still develop him.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, my question is, if you have a can't-miss talent, because obviously most likely a 5th, 6th, 7th round guy isn't going to be better than Jalen Hurts. I will say this, Jalen Hurts played very well as a passing quarterback in Oklahoma. I saw a piece on it recently. It was throws down the field. It was deep throws. It wasn't just sitting there wide open throws. He actually has developed greatly last season as a passer, so he's a little bit underrated as a passer. People think of him as a runner, but he's also a solid passer. I don't know. It depends how you feel about the quarterbacks in the draft. Most likely you don't do that for money reasons. I do think, though, they got to move on from Carson Wentz. If he wows them at training camp, okay, maybe then you give him a chance. But to me, it looks like he's done, and you can't trade him. I don't know that anyone is going to want to pick him up in a trade anyways. So at this point, you take your losses, and you have the high salary, and you sit him on the bench. I mean, there is no good option, and you pick the less bad option because you have to give the guy that gives you the best chance to win, put him on the field. Also, though, I will say this with Wentz, they should have ran the ball more when he was the quarterback. Last week, they have more of a conservative effort to run the ball with the running back than they have in weeks past. So that's something that they could have done retroactively a few weeks before. But at this point, it's Jalen Hurts' team, and we'll see how he does.
It'll be interesting to see how it plays out, but really unfortunate by all accounts. Carson Wentz, really, really good guy out in Philadelphia, and just, how far he's fallen from having some really, really nice early career success.
Yeah, you got to think it could be the COVID-related stuff. Just not that he had it or anything, but just everything going on in the world maybe has impacted him in some way.
Possible, but I will say he also struggled last year, so we saw this kind of coming. He's aggressively getting worse the last few seasons, and that's what's scary. This wasn't a sudden thing. He went from suddenly great to good to average to bad and then to really bad this year. So it's been a gradual decline. But he was a good college football player at North Dakota State. He didn't get to play in any conference championship games at the FBS level. He was at an FCS school. He won several national championships, though. We do have some good conference championship games. We're going to quickly run through all 10 of them. We're going to focus on the ACC at the end, but we're going to get through some of the Power 5 conferences at the end, some of the Group of 5 now. So we're going to start with the Conference USA title game. 7-1 Marshall takes on 5-3 UAB. Who do you guys have in this one? By the way, I'm tracking these picks, so I'll have who finishes best next week. I'm expecting 10-0, maybe 9-1.
I'll admit I haven't watched very much of them, but I'll take the Thundering Herd, one of my favorite nicknames as far as college programs go. I'll go with Marshall over UAB for Conference USA.
Yeah, I'll agree with you, Tom. Give me Marshall in a close game.
Is that a little hint of the number there, Drew?
What's the line? I can't even remember
like
the line.
5.5 or 6.5, something like that.
It's supposed to be a close game. I mean, UAB, it is a good program, and Marshall, of course, 7-1 on the season. It's interesting. Well, I guess they both played 8 games, but Grant Wells for Marshall, 16 touchdowns on the year. This guy can sling it around, and then Brendan Knox, the running back over there for the Thundering Herd. Watch out for him in this one.
Yeah, I've got Marshall in this one. The big difference is the defenses. On offense, the two teams are about the same. Marshall only allowing 11 points per game this year. UAB allows about double that. Marshall did get shut out last time out, but I thought that was really uncharacteristic against Rice. Expect them to get back on offense, and the defense will win the game for them.
Yeah, that was definitely a surprise to me when the Herd got shut out by Rice. So kudos to Rice on that one. But, yeah, this should be a good game. It's tomorrow night, Friday night.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think another game that's tomorrow night is the MAC title game. 5-0 Buffalo versus 5-1 Ball State. Ball State, by the way, one of the colleges I almost went to. We all went to Mizzou together, but Ball State was in the running.
I did not know that. That's interesting. Ball State, Indiana.
Yeah. They have their telecommunications department. David Letterman went to school there. He gives them money, decent program. Certainly not Mizzou journalism quality, but a pretty good program that gave me a half-ride scholarship. So there's that too.
Well, as far as the football game goes, I'm going to go with the Buffalo Bulls on this one. Again, haven't seen much of their play this year, but just looking at the results that they've had this season, they've been blowing everybody out of the water. I think that they can win pretty handedly against the Ball State Cardinals. Ball State's only loss on the year was to Miami of Ohio, whom Buffalo beat 42-10. Alma mater of Ben Roethlisberger. So by the transitive properties, they have nothing to do with sports. I'm picking the Buffalo Bulls to beat the Ball State Cardinals.
I'll take the Buffalo Bulls to win at Ford Field in Detroit.
Jared Patterson tied an NCAA record with 8 rushing touchdowns earlier this season. Expected to run all over Ball State as Buffalo wins the MAC title game. Next up, the Mountain West title game, what I think could be the most competitive title game. 6-0 San Jose State versus 5-1 Boise State. Boise State, though, is favored by the line. So what do you guys think about this Mountain West title game?
I think it should be a really, really good game. You have San Jose State that has not lost this year. You have Boise State, whose only loss has been to, at the time, a top 10 BYU program. So two certainly very talented schools going at it. My only regret is that it is not going to be played on the blue field at Boise State. I don't think. I think that's at a neutral site.
It's in Las Vegas.
It's in Las Vegas, so that's always a cool thing to see. And, of course, they have a long history with all the trick plays. It'd be great if they could break one out, but I don't necessarily think that they'll need to beat San Jose State to win the Mountain West.
This will be an entertaining game. You have former SEC quarterback Nick Starkel for San Jose State. He's probably about 35 years old, playing in his 10th year in FBS. But, we'll see if Starkel can get it done. But I think I'm going to go with Boise State, the Broncos, in this one.
Yeah, first Mountain West title game for San Jose State. Boise State is used to being there. They've played in the last 3 Mountain West title games, winning 2 of them. Former Arkansas State head coach Brian Harsin and Boise State come out on top in what could be a close game. Another good game, the Sun Belt title game. Number 12, Coastal Carolina, 11-0, taking on number 19, Louisiana Lafayette, 9-1. Louisiana Lafayette, by the way, beat Iowa State earlier in the season. Coastal Carolina won at Lafayette by 3 earlier this year. Should be a good Fun Belt title game, the conference I used to cover years ago at my first job. They call it the Fun Belt.
The Fun Belt, yeah. Now, speaking of program nicknames that are among my favorite, the Chanticleers, as we talked about a couple weeks ago. I really like the pronunciation of that. I like Coastal Carolina to win this one. They've already beat Louisiana Lafayette once. I think they'll do it again to prove that they are a legit team this year that should be ranked higher than 13 in the country.
Entertainment value in this game going to be very high at the Teal Field in Conway, South Carolina. Man, I really want to pick the Chanticleers, but I don't know, I just have a feeling that the Raging Cajun's going to go into Conway and maybe get the victory.
Drew Brackett going with the upset there. Of course, I tell you this, Coastal won at Lafayette by 3 earlier this year. Now they're at home. I think that's good enough for Coastal to win at home. I do think this could be also probably the two most competitive games. I look at the Mountain West and the Sun Belt. Could go either way. I just think Coastal is going to go 12-0. And guess what, Tom Castleman? And we'll talk about this maybe when we get to the American title game, so we can kind of transition here. But they're probably not going to get to go to a New Year's Six bowl game because Cincinnati is ahead of them, even though Cincinnati's still further behind. They're ranked number 1 in the playoff, number 9 rather, Coastal number 12. American title game, Cincinnati taking on Tulsa, who's ranked 23rd. Cincinnati getting pushed down to number 9 in the rankings, ahead of 2-loss Florida and Georgia. And they got pushed back when they haven't played the last few weeks, which hasn't affected some of the upper teams. So I don't know. They've got to take care of business. They're about a 2-touchdown favorite. I think they win big because they're motivated to show the committee what's up.
Yeah, I think they're going to be angry as all get out. I look for them to just absolutely run over Tulsa in all 3 phases of the game. There's a little bit of a potential for them to get a little bit actually unfocused, to get too hyped up, too amped up. If Tulsa's able to counterpunch a little bit, that could knock Cincinnati off to make it closer than what we expect it to be. But I think the Cincinnati Bearcats have a much better chance of being locked in, focused, and eager to prove that they belong higher up in the rankings than where the committee's been putting them, in just kind of a sham of how they're putting things together.
Cincinnati at home, I'll take them for the victory.
Yeah, interesting note there, Tom. You talk about how the committee is undervaluing Cincinnati. Well, they're an 8-0 team, and they've prepared for this team, Tulsa. They were supposed to play last week, and it got canceled. They were going to play back-to-back weeks, so certainly they should be ready in that game. Moving on to the Power 5 conferences. Pac-12 title game, 5-0, number 13 USC, taking on 3-2 Oregon. They were supposed to take on Washington, who I think was 4-1, but Washington canceled because of COVID. They bumped up the next team. Oregon, by the way, was supposed to be the number 1 team out of the Pac-12 this year. Get off to a 3-0 start. They've lost 2 in a row. USC is 5-0, a big-name program, but still number 13 because they've squeaked by some games in a very weak conference. I think they're probably going to squeak by Oregon again. What do you guys think?
I agree with that assessment. I think USC is probably the more talented program. I look for them to beat the Oregon Ducks. Not handedly, perhaps. I think it'll be, I don't know if the line's with a field goal, something like that. I think they'll beat them by a little bit more. But yeah, USC, another team that's looking to prove that, in spite playing 5 games, that they should be a little bit higher up as well.
Should be a beautiful night in Los Angeles at the Coliseum. I like Oregon to upset the Trojans.
Wow. So that's
You're going counter on 2 picks.
Tom Cassim and I over here are going chalk, and we got an upset bracket over there. I love it. The funny thing is he's probably going to hit one of those upsets, and we'll miss one of those picks, and we'll all have the same record. So we'll all go like 9-1 or 8-2 or something. Moving on, Big 12 title game. You talk about the committee and a team maybe how they don't love Cincinnati enough. Well, they sure love Iowa State, perhaps number 6 in the country, and they're 8-2. They've got 2 losses, and they're 6th in the country, and they're an underdog in this game. So Vegas clearly doesn't like Iowa State as much as the committee does. They're taking on 7-2 Oklahoma. They're ranked number 10 in the country. Iowa State beat Oklahoma by 7 earlier in the season, but that was like the 3rd game of the year for Oklahoma.
Yeah, I think that Oklahoma got out to a little bit of a rough start, losing to K-State and then again to Iowa State in the first couple of weeks. But since then, they've really put things together. They beat Texas pretty handedly. They had big wins against TCU, Texas Tech, Kansas. I mean, who's not going to beat Kansas 62-9? And then in a game against Oklahoma State, blowing them out 41-13. I think Oklahoma is clicking at the right time, and I look for them to beat the Cyclones.
It's really difficult for me here to go against Iowa State. Breece Hall a fantastic running back, probably the best running back in the country. Maybe Travis Etienne gets a run for his money with him. Those guys probably the top 2 in the country. So it's tough for me to go against Iowa State, but this game in Arlington at Jerry World, take the Sooners.
Yeah, Tom, you mentioned that Oklahoma is playing phenomenal football. Since that loss against Iowa State, they've won 7 straight, and they're playing great on defense, too. It's not just the offense. They had a young quarterback. I think earlier in the season he had to figure things out, perhaps, and he hadn't gotten as much work in the same way that maybe he wouldn't during a COVID season. He certainly figured it out. I like Oklahoma in this game. Real quick side note to this, and we'll talk about this maybe more during the ACC game, which we'll get to soon, but I think the committee putting Iowa State at number 6, despite having 2 losses, they might have done that on purpose just to save themselves in the event that Clemson loses to Notre Dame, to say, well, look, we're going to let Clemson in. Look where we had Iowa State. They had 2 losses, and they were still number 6. I don't think Clemson will lose, but I think this is kind of one of those moves that the committee is doing it on purpose to make sure Clemson is in.
Yeah, I'd agree with you on that. I don't know if we have it necessarily in the rundown later, but after these picks, that's certainly something we can talk about with the college playoff committee. Moving over to the abbreviated Big Ten, after a little bit of rules changing or regulation changing and shuffling around some schedules, Ohio State will be playing against the Northwestern Wildcats, a game where Ohio State is favored by 3 scores last I checked. What do you guys... I'm sorry?
Yeah, about 3 touchdowns, 20 and a half.
Yeah, 3 touchdowns specifically. What do you guys have? How do you guys like that game playing out?
Man, this one, it's tough to go against the Buckeyes. So, I'm going to go for the Buckeyes, but not because of Justin Fields. Master T going to have a big game Saturday.
I think that's
also on the all-name team, Master T.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
3 touchdown line, probably about what it should be. I think the cover could go either way, but I think Ohio State wins in a resounding fashion. I will ask you guys this, though. Let's say Ohio State wins by a field goal. Is there any chance they get left out of the playoff if they win?
If they win, I don't think so. We can get into a little bit. I think the committee's basically, they know what they want to do, and they're just going to look for reasons to retrofit to justify their actions. I think that's what they're doing. I think Ohio State beats Northwestern as well. I think, if you're to run the simulation 100 times, there are probably a couple of scenarios where Northwestern can make it a close game and perhaps even win it. They have the type of defense that can really kind of grind down a game. It wouldn't surprise me if the game's close for most of it, and then in the last, 7-8 minutes or so, Ohio State goes, oh yeah, we're Ohio State, and then just blows the doors off of the Wildcats. But Pat Fitzgerald is usually able to get his teams to play superior talent really, really close to the vest for the first 3 quarters or so of a game. So I don't know if it's going to be a 3-touchdown game, but I do think the Ohio State Buckeyes will win the championship.
Yeah, the difference in that game is the offense. Northwestern has a great, they've got a great coach, but they don't have near the firepower
right
in that game. Also agree with you. We'll get into this more, but the committee's made up their minds, and I think we kind of know who's going to be in the playoff. We've
known for a while
what happens. ACC title game, though, is kind of probably the one that people have their eyeballs on. Number 2, Notre Dame.
Just skipping the SEC.
We'll get to. Do you want to do the SEC first? Oh, here's my dog is barking over here.
Messi is agreeing about the disrespect to the SEC, just passing them by.
All right, we'll pick the SEC. I meant to put the SEC there, but I somehow maybe didn't put it in my notes right. But here it is. I see the SEC. So number 1, Alabama, 10-0. Number 7, Florida, 8-2. Still number 7, dropping only 1 spot, despite losing at home to an LSU team that had only 3 wins. 17-point spread in this one. Alabama probably going to cover anyways.
Yeah, I'm looking for Alabama to win this one. I mean, there's some joke to make about throwing a shoe's distance and how far Florida fell in the rankings. It should have been considerably more when you look at the team that they lost to. But I look for Alabama to beat Florida, put them as a 3-loss team, and well lower in the rankings.
Yeah, I think Alabama wins this game Saturday night in Atlanta.
Do they cover? Because I think they cover. They've won every game by double digits. Their closest game was 15 points against Ole Miss early in the season. They beat Georgia by 17. I think they're pretty safe to cover by 17 in this one just because Florida's defense is pretty bad. I think Alabama's going to run up the score there, and they're going to limit Kyle Trask a little bit. Not stop him, but limit him. Interesting thing, I think this game kind of decides the Heisman race. Justin Fields has played less games. We had Trevor Lawrence go down because of COVID. He's played less games. If Mac Jones clearly outplays Kyle Trask in this game, Mac Jones from Alabama probably should win the Heisman and probably will win the Heisman. Alabama too good on all sides of the ball. They're going to win this game. ACC title game. Number 2, Notre Dame, 10-0 against number 3, Clemson, losing that one game against Notre Dame. Despite Notre Dame being Clemson, Clemson is still a 10.5 point favorite in this game.
That's the power of Trevor Lawrence for you right there. I think Clemson does beat Notre Dame. I think it's going to be closer than that line suggests because Notre Dame is that good. All around, Ian Book has we've seen him develop a little bit throughout the season, which has been kind of nice to see a little bit of linear progression from him. I think the Golden Domers play it pretty closely and keep themselves within the playoff contention, despite not having a title to their resume.
Yeah, this one should be back and forth, but I got to think that Trevor Lawrence and company, Clemson, going to come away with the victory.
Yeah, that first game was kind of a perfect storm for Notre Dame. They were at home. Trevor Lawrence was out. A couple of defensive players were out. Also in that 7-point overtime win for Notre Dame, Clemson had 3 fumbles in that game, and one of them went back for a touchdown. Certainly a little bit of luck involved. You can't rely on Clemson to fumble 3 times. If they fumbled 2 times, they still probably would have won the game. So I think Clemson's pretty safe bet to win. Travis Etienne had 18 carries for 28 yards. Clearly, Notre Dame's defense is very tough to go up against. I don't think he'll have a big day. I think Trevor Lawrence will be the reason they win. But Travis Etienne cannot possibly have as bad of a game as he did last time. Certainly the offensive line part of that as well, but he's going to do better than he did. Gosh, that line is close, though. I don't know. That could go either way. I probably agree with you guys that Notre Dame goes ahead and does cover that line. And I don't know if you mentioned, one of you said, keeps Notre Dame as a lock or as a candidate in the playoffs. Well, unless they lose by 4 or 5 touchdowns, they're in. I think, barring something crazy, I think we know Alabama's in. We know Notre Dame is in. And Clemson and Ohio State are for sure in with wins, and Clemson probably in without a loss as well. Well, I'll ask that question again, but let me ask you a hypothetical, Tom. Since you brought this up, clearly based on resume, Cincinnati should be ahead of Florida and Georgia, but for all the people hating on the College Playoff Committee, what the College Playoff Committee is doing is, I think, yes, they're looking for the big-name matchups, but I think in this COVID season, in their mind, they're picking who they think is the best team regardless of resume. They don't really care about resume that much because it's a crazy season. So I think they're telling us that they think Florida and Georgia are better than Cincinnati, and they know that Cincinnati likely will hop Florida anyways with the loss this week. So Florida, Georgia, Cincinnati, I want an honest answer. And maybe we haven't seen enough of Cincinnati, so we can't know for sure. But if they play on our neutral field, do you really think Cincinnati can beat Florida or Georgia on a neutral field? Like, the percentage chance is sure.
Right.
But if they play 100 games, are you confident that Cincinnati would clearly be the better team? Because I'm not.
I think it would be a good contest.
Oh, I mean, certainly would be good. It could go either way. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. I don't know who would win that game. It would be very hard for me to do, and that's what the committee is saying, though. The committee is saying that they think that if they played in a game like that, they simply just don't think Cincinnati is better. They have a better record. They have a better resume, but they're going by maybe it's the brand name, maybe it's the conference, maybe they're playing favoritism, but I think it goes beyond that. They're simply saying, who do we think would win this matchup? And in their minds, they think that Cincinnati would lose that matchup, and it's hard to disagree with them. I don't know. It could go either way.
Yeah, I don't disagree, and I don't think that Cincinnati necessarily would, say out of 10 games win more than a couple of them. But I think they deserve the chance to prove that, right? What the committee is doing by putting 3 two-loss teams ahead of Cincinnati is saying, we don't care as much about having a 2-loss team being closer in contention for a playoff spot than an undefeated group of 5 school. I think that's what the committee is saying and how they're looking to justify putting the teams that, sure, have more talent because, the more talented kids are going to go to the Power 5 programs. There's a reason that there are Power 5 programs. But I also think it's, how many people are going to want to watch the Cincinnati Bearcats as opposed to the Florida Gators? There's a lot more of a love and hate relationship for the Florida Gators than there is for the Cincinnati Bearcats. So I think that's part of it too, and that the college football committee, they're looking at more than just the games. They're looking at protecting the visual appeal, the fan interest in the games as well. So I don't have to like it, but I don't get to make any of the decisions, so I have to put up with it. But I do think that it's a bit of a gripe that, if you're going to say like we value titles, we value 1 or 0 loss teams. Well, that kind of, you're not standing by that now. It's not a clear set standard that, we don't get to see the process. I think that'd be fascinating television. I mean, they have a program to release the rankings. It'd be great just to see them talk about it because there's so much that goes into it. They have to justify, 1 through 25, who's ranked and why they're ranked. I would really want to, get their unvarnished opinions on it, but we're not going to. So I'm just going to gripe about it a little bit because that is my want.
Yeah, I think what will be interesting, though, I think that Cincinnati wins. They'll probably hop Georgia and Florida. However, the winner of the Big 12 title game, Oklahoma, is sitting there like 1 or 2 spots back of Cincinnati. Mm-hmm. Should Oklahoma win the Big 12 title game, Oklahoma will then hop Cincinnati. So they're in no man's land. They have no chance. But I think what they are fighting for, though, is a New Year's 6 game because if they can win convincingly, the problem is if, say, they win a close game, and you have Coastal wins convincingly against Lafayette, then Coastal could possibly hop Cincinnati. Coastal Carolina, by the way, has 11 wins. They could get to 12 wins. No one else in the country has 12 wins. So, something to think about.
It'd be nice to get both of them in. That'd be fun.
Yeah, hard to say. It'd be, what would be really cool, and I won't go too long in this. I talked about the playoff system, how I want the 8 teams. I want the 5 power conference champions, 1 group of 5, then a wild card. But gosh, this wouldn't be able to do it. But I would love to see, in a scenario like this, change the schedule the last week of the season just to see Cincinnati and Coastal play each other.
Yeah, the College Football Playoff Committee missed a pretty big opportunity to say, hey, with COVID, with all these things that are going on, for 1 year and 1 year only, we're going to expand to 8 playoff teams because we're not going to have as many bowl games. I mean, that right there.
And we've got teams canceling left and right. We're down to 32 bowl games, I think I saw today on Twitter.
Yeah, if you have it's just okay, we're just going to have, the top 8 teams for this 1 year do a college football playoff and kind of in that fashion kind of settle once, maybe not once and forever, but definitely settle that gripe that, Boise State had once upon a time, TCU had about a decade back, give or take, and then UCF of, hey, we're not this juggernaut name brand program, but we're a really good team and we're not being given the same opportunities because we're not a Texas or a Michigan or we don't have the name brand for it. This would have been the year to do that because everything's weird anyway. Baseball, basketball, all the different sports have been different. College football missed a real opportunity to be different this year too.
Yeah, in case you hear it in the background, this is my dog chewing his bone. So I hope you don't hear it. I think he's licking his hand right now. But that's Messi, named after Lionel Messi, the best soccer player ever. He agrees with you about that, Tom. I would say, though, we'll move on from college football unless Drew wants to add anything. Is there anything you want to add, Mr. Brackett?
Now let's talk some hoops.
College hoops. All right, we're going to give our college hoops previews. We're going to transition into the ACC, which is wide open league this year. You've got Duke and UNC, already 2 losses. Duke ranked number 1, UNC number 22. Our Mizzou Tigers ranked number 16, ahead of both Duke and UNC, also ahead of Kentucky. We'll get to the SEC in a little bit. Number 15, Florida State. Number 23, Louisville. Number 24, Clemson. Virginia at number 17. This is probably maybe the deepest league. I mean, I think the Big Ten is up there and the Big 12. I think those leagues are better at the top. But if we were going to go up and down in terms of the most depth, this ACC certainly competes for that. Who do you guys have coming out as the ACC champions this year?
I'm going to go with Florida State. I know that Leonard Hamilton has lost a lot of talent in this most recent NBA draft. Fingers crossed that one of his players on the Chicago Bulls turns out really, really well. And for Patrick Williams, early returns say that I think we could be onto something there. The great thing about Florida State is that they get pretty much a bunch of the same player, and they play a really nice switch defense 1 through 5. That makes it really difficult for an opposing team to get good matchups against them. So they go for length, they go for athleticism, and a lot of diversity. Leonard Hamilton likes to play a pretty deep rotation. I think that's going to be really important as players are going to be shuttling in and out with COVID issues throughout the season, and I'm sure we'll have plenty of those. I'll go with Florida State as my favorite pick out of the ACC.
Yeah, I agree with Tom. You got to go with Florida State here. And you mentioned the depth. And Leonard Hamilton, he's had success here recently as the head coach of Florida State. So with their depth and experience, those veteran guys, I know they lost a few to the draft. That was probably several years ago now. But you got to go with the Noles.
I'm going to go with a little bit of a surprise pick. This might surprise Drew at least. A team whose brand of basketball I personally cannot stand, but I think they are going to win the conference. I think Virginia, and the reason why I can't stand it is I love up and down tempo and points. They slow the tempo down. They play great. They're not the best on offense. Their 5 leading scorers this year, 3 of them are seniors, 2 of them are juniors. Let's not forget that Virginia is the most recent college basketball champion that we had. Of course, last season, March Madness was canceled, but the year before, we had Virginia winning the tournament. And they lost a few key players, but a lot of these guys who are in there now, they were on that national championship team. Some of them were key players, some not as key, but they all had the experience. They saw them win a game. They can win a game. They can win the conference. I think I like Virginia. Florida State, man, they've had talent for a few years now, but I can't see Florida State winning the ACC. This is basketball, not football. I just don't see it. I'm going Virginia Cavaliers. Big East.
Will certainly be Big East, yes. The restructured Big East from a couple of years back, not the same powers that used to be with Georgetown and Syracuse going up against each other. I think here it's a little bit more clear-cut in terms of picking out a favored team. Jay Wright, one of the best-dressed coaches in any sport, and the Villanova Wildcats. Oh, man, they're Wildcats, right? I'm blanking on that all of a sudden. I think Villanova is probably the favorite team out of that conference this year.
Yeah, I agree. You got to go with the Wildcats. This year, I think they have – I don't know what the Big East is going to be like. Creighton, I know, is ranked, so they'll be right up there. But give me the Cats.
Yeah, Creighton's the only other team in the top 25 right now. Villanova number 7, Creighton number 9. Creighton just had a loss to Marquette, though, so they may slip. They lost to Marquette in Kansas. Not a lot of competition in the Big East. Tom mentioned it. They used to be kind of the best conference in basketball. Kind of gone down now. You guys mentioned Jay Wright and Villanova. Well, they're ranked number 7. You look at some of those Big Ten teams ahead of them, and you look at the Big 12 with Baylor and Kansas. They will have a real shot to get a number 1 seed just because they'll probably have a better record. They'll probably have a better resume. We just saw them dominate a Butler team, which probably supposed to be one of their tougher games. They've won the league 7 of the last 8 years outright. They've won it 6 out of 8. They shared it last year, but they've won 2 straight. I expect Villanova to win again. Speaking of a conference that is down, though, the Pac-12 is also down. I believe right now they've got no one ranked in the top 25 out of the Pac-12.
Yeah, in this conference, I basically went to the preseason rankings because I didn't really like any of the programs I saw, and I believe Oregon was the only team in the preseason top 25.
After losing to Mizzou, they dropped out. They lost to Mizzou.
Yeah,
and I watched that team, by
the way. I think Oregon Ducks, out of like you said, a really, really weak Pac-12. I don't have a whole lot to say about, Pac-12 After Dark Basketball Edition. Oregon Ducks probably the team that make it out of there.
Wow. Okay. Tom goes with Oregon to win the Pac-12,
sure.
And I'm going to go with UCLA this season. They have returning guys, and quite frankly, you're right. I mean, Oregon lost Pritchard from last year. He was a heck of a player, so they're kind of maybe reloading/rebuilding. So I'm going to roll with the Bruins.
Yeah, I've got to go with UCLA. They were close. Oregon was a slight favorite according to the writers, but UCLA was right there in the preseason rankings for the conference. Oregon always reloads with talent, as you mentioned. But, Drew, you said it. You said it yourself. I'm going to give the stat even better than you. 5 returning starters back for UCLA. So they've got their entire team back, and they played very well down the stretch. Oregon may end up being the better basketball team come March Madness, but I think UCLA will play better earlier in the season, which will result in the conference title. I did watch Oregon in person. A lot of these projections, we haven't seen the teams play that much. I did catch Oregon against Mizzou. I was not very impressed. I like UCLA edging out that Pac-12 title over Oregon. And once again, a conference, though, that is down in basketball. The SEC is down this year. Kentucky's 1-4. The only teams ranked in the SEC are number 10, Tennessee, and our alma mater, number 16, Mizzou. How about that? Who do you guys like out of the SEC this year?
Well, I guess the saying is go big or go homer. I'm going to go with the Missouri Tigers. I don't really have much reason to doubt the alma mater, so I'm going to go with them. I'm going to ride and die with the Missouri Tigers winning the SEC.
I originally had Tennessee, but, looking at Mizzou's roster, Xavier Pinson, returning starter, Drew Smith, Mark Smith, Mitchell Smith, name that Smith, Jeremiah Tillman, Torrance Watson. They have a lot of returning guys, and, Konzo Martin, with his coaching, this is a team that could possibly win the SEC unless Kentucky obviously can figure it out. And you never know, Auburn, Tennessee, I mean, these teams will all be up there. So I think it's going to be a dogfight until the end.
But who's your pick?
Oh, Mizzou.
So by the way, I covered this Mizzou Tigers team the last 2 years, working at the CBS affiliate in Columbia, Jefferson City, Missouri. They have their entire team back. It's interesting, though. They've really struggled in close games the last few years. It's one of those weird things where you have your entire team back, but they really weren't very successful. They were a team that was right around 500 the last 2 years, under 500 in the league. I think they've taken a big step up, and I think playing together longer helps. Experience helps. If they put it all together consistently, sure, they can do it. But the problem with this team is they have a lot of inconsistency. Xavier Pinson 1 week looks like an All-American. The next week he looks like some kid who's a freshman and doesn't know how to play the game of basketball. And Jeremiah Tillman's the same way, by the way, because 1 week he'll get 4 fouls and 5 fouls in a matter of 10 minutes. The next game he gets you a double-double. So the problem with this Tigers team is you simply don't know what to expect with them. They're wildly inconsistent. They do have their 5 leading scorers back, but some of those guys you mentioned, Torrance Watson has been a terrible player at Mizzou, hasn't really delivered for them. It'll come down to Mark Smith and whether he can stay healthy because he's the one three-point shooter they have. That team plays very good defense. They're great at shooting free throws. The one area they struggle is the three-point shot. If Pinson and Smith play to their potential, it's possible. But over the course of a regular season, I've seen these guys play. They look better this year, but I simply don't trust them down the stretch. That same group has lost so many close games that I look at Tennessee. They're allowing 47 points per game this season, even better than Mizzou on defense. Tennessee has a great defense. They've really had a lot of consistency the last few years. Again, similar case as Virginia. 2 years ago, Tennessee had a great roster, a lot of great players, were like a 2 seed in the tournament. Some of those guys are gone now, but a lot of those guys now have experienced that winning culture. Tennessee simply has the culture. Mizzou does not. I would like to see Mizzou win the SEC. I can see them getting second or third, but to me, I think Tennessee has to be a heavy favorite to win the SEC. I don't think it'll be that close of a race, to be honest. But one race that should be close is the Big Ten, and this could be the best conference in all of college basketball. You've got Iowa number 3 in the country. They're 6-0. Michigan State number 4. They're 6-0. And they beat Duke at Duke, by the way. Wisconsin's ranked number 12. They have a ton of starters back. We talk about experience. Well, those are starters who have won in the past. Illinois at number 13. They did lose to Mizzou on the road in a close game. Also lost to Baylor, but Illinois looks really good this season. It's going to be a dogfight between those 4 teams. It could truly go anyway.
Yeah, this is just so tough because you have, great coaching all around, great depth in terms of the really, really good teams. I think that the conference records aren't necessarily going to indicate how good these teams are in relation to other conferences simply because you don't have a bunch of top 25 programs across the board. I mean, I'm still trying to work through the decision myself on who to pick. I mean, obviously the team that I have the most exposure to and is closest to home is, the Illinois Fighting Illini, Kofi Coburn, the big man in the middle. Ayo Dosunmu is playing fantastic. So
lottery pick. Lock that in, lottery pick.
I mean,
it's awesome.
I mean, sure, I'll go Illini. I know it's going to be a little bit off the wall for that one. I know that Iowa and Michigan State are also really great programs. Luke Garza is probably going to be the best player in college basketball this year. But I'll take Brett Underwood's team and the Fighting Illini to win the Big Ten.
Yeah, this is going to be a very competitive conference, and also, come March Madness, you could see this being a 9-10 team bid league, possibly. A lot of talent. They're gonna, they'll beat each other up in conference play, but ACC does that every year, so it's gonna be quite interesting. But give me the Iowa Hawkeyes. Luka Garza is going to be the difference. And he's one of the nation's best big men, probably the best, one of the nation's best players. So I think he leads the Hawkeyes to win the Big Ten.
Yeah, you mentioned Garza. Well, he's averaging 29 points per game, which is second in the nation. Iowa right now, can you guys guess how much they're scoring? It's first in the nation. I know it's early in the season. They won't keep this up. But guess how many points they're averaging this year in college basketball?
I mean, I'm looking at it. So
it's like some NBA number, like in the 90s, right? Like they have a lot of big.
100.5 points per game. It's just remarkable how efficiently they're playing on offense. I will say I changed my mind on this pick. Originally, I was going to say, well, there's all these bunched up teams. I did see Michigan State in person against Duke. They played great the second half. I love Tom Izzo. He's a great coach. I was going to say, well, it'll be close. Let's go with Michigan State because they have the winning culture. They have the coach. But the more I looked at it, man, that Iowa team lights it up, and they play good defense too. I will go with Garza and Iowa to eke out the Big Ten title. The interesting thing about college hoops is three conferences kind of are dominating a lot of the top 25 teams. It's the ACC, it's the Big Ten, and the other one is the Big 12, which has two of the top teams in the country, number 2 Baylor, number 5 Kansas, number 8 West Virginia, and number 11 Texas and Texas Tech at 14. Who do you guys like in the Big 12?
We talked about them a little bit ago when they were supposed to have a game against Gonzaga that got canceled due to some COVID issues. I like the Baylor Bears coming out of the Big 12. I think they still play that 1-3-1 defense, do a lot of trapping, have a lot of great talent. Notorious for not necessarily getting the job done in the NCAA tournament, but I see them getting there and winning the conference outright this year.
Yeah, I think Baylor's also going to win the Big 12, and you have Jared Butler returning, Maceo Teague, Davion Mitchell, Mark Vidal, forward in the middle there. So they've got a lot coming back, and I think they're going to groove this season. And, yeah, we did miss a potential matchup with Gonzaga, but Iowa, the Hawkeyes play Gonzaga on Saturday at noon Eastern. So be sure to watch that one.
Gonzaga will win. I love the Zags.
That'll be a heck of a game.
I will say this. I think right now Baylor has to be the clear pick. I think it'll go down to Baylor and Kansas. I mean, Kansas is always in the mix. They're Kansas. But right now, this feels weird to say this, and it feels very weird to say this. But right now, Baylor actually has more talent. If you sit and watch the games and you see the production, Baylor is a better basketball team. Kansas beat Creighton by 1 at home. I know Creighton's very good, but they also had a close game against North Dakota State. They barely beat Kentucky by like 3 points. Kentucky is a mess. I know it's early in the season. I know KU will get better. But right now, to me, I think Baylor, oddly enough, is more talented. This is one of those teams that has no weaknesses. They play great on offense. They play great on defense. And they have incredible balance, so many different scorers, so many guys returning. I also like the Baylor Bears. But more basketball talk. We'll do a full NBA preview next week. I'm excited about it. But the NBA top 10 player list came out according to ESPN, and the list was extremely flawed. I'll get into that in a little bit. So I wanted to get your guys' take. This is who the NBA ranked as its top 10 players. I'll go straight down the list. Number 1, of course, LeBron James. Can't argue with that. Number 2, Anthony Davis. A lot to argue about there. We'll get there. Giannis, 2-time MVP. Number 3. 4 is Luka Doncic, who is the MVP favorite according to odds makers for this year. Number 5, Kawhi Leonard. Number 6, Kevin Durant. Number 7, Damian Lillard. Number 8, Stephen Curry. Number 9, James Harden. And number 10, Nikola Jokic. So one thing that stuck out to me first to get this rolling is Anthony Davis at number 2. As great as he played, is Anthony Davis really the second best player in the NBA?
Yes, I think he's more versatile than Giannis Antetokounmpo. Anthony Davis has a better three-point shot and better at free throws. He also has the inside presence. I think Giannis is stronger inside, but I think because of the versatility of Anthony Davis, he's the better player. But, I mean, it's 1A, 1B.
Yeah, this is the sort of thing where, like, looking at the list, I don't really see a whole lot to really, get uptight about. I mean, like, I might flip-flop, Lillard and Durant, given that Durant didn't play. Same reason I might flip Harden and Curry. But, I mean, when we're talking about the list at the way it's been put together, I went ahead and I looked at 11 through 50, and I didn't really see anybody on there that deserved to be in the top 10 more than the guys that they had. So I think they did a pretty good job with the list. I think, like if you're doing, let's just say a true fantasy basketball draft and you're looking to build out franchises, Anthony Davis might be the first pick overall simply because he's younger than LeBron James. I know that's not the purpose of this exercise, but I think that on talent, on what he provides both offensively and then defensively with the way he's able to play, I have no problem with Anthony Davis as the second best player in the current NBA. There's so much great talent in professional basketball right now. It's hard to look at the list and say like anybody's egregiously, too high or too low. I think you can quibble with a pick here or there, and like I said, flip-flopping, but I think overall they got it right. Whoever they is. I looked it up. I don't know who the actual people are. It's just like our NBA experts. Like they didn't put names as, the committee of who decided this over at ESPN, but I think they did a pretty good job.
I do agree with you that they got the top 10 right, and overall they did a decent job. I will say this, I think of these 10 players, LeBron is clearly number 1, Jokic is clearly number 10, 2 through 9. We're talking about minimal gaps. The second best player in the NBA is very close to the 9th best player in the NBA. This is how close these guys are. But for the sake of having to argue that, who is where, who's where, I do think Anthony Davis is too high at number 2. And I don't agree with you that he would be the first player taken. I think he'd be the third player taken. I think there's 2 players there who are slightly better than him. Again, we're talking minimal. But Anthony Davis is not more well-rounded than Giannis. I don't believe that to be true. Davis has gotten better at threes, but his three-point percentage isn't very good. It's about what Giannis's is. He is a better free throw shooter, but they're both very good inside. Giannis is a little bit quicker. Also, Giannis is a better assist guy. He sets up his guys a little bit better than Davis does. We've also seen Anthony Davis when he's been the leader of a team. Yes, it was in the Western Conference, but most of his career he didn't make the playoffs, and when he did, he was like an 8 seed getting swept against the Warriors. So this guy wasn't getting...
And he was on the Pelicans.
I know he was on the Pelicans. But, if you look at Giannis Antetokounmpo, some of these guys, granted they got better this year, they added Drew Holiday, but he hasn't had the greatest players around him on the Bucks, and he was leading them to back-to-back best records in the NBA. I'm not saying Anthony Davis should be leading the Pelicans, to the Western Conference Finals, but he should be able to get out of the first round. Anthony Davis is a fantastic player. Like I said, these margins are small, but I think LeBron James has helped his game. LeBron James knows how to find them. When you play with LeBron James, it looks easier. If you're starting from fresh in the NBA, you need ball dominance guys who make their teammates better, and that's what Giannis does better, and Luka does it even better than both of those guys. So I personally think that Davis is centimeters behind Giannis and Luka, but where I really take anger at the ratings, and granted, and I'm so frustrated by it, but
angry
how healthy they are. However, I just don't buy Kevin Durant at number 6 or Stephen Curry at number 8. I think these guys, to me, until I've seen them play a full season, you can argue and say, well, we got to see them healthy, but if you're going to rank them in the top 10 at all, then don't rank them at all. Just put an asterisk, top 10 players, not counting guys who are hurt, because you look at Kevin Durant in his preseason game for the Nets, he played pretty good. 5 of 12 shooting, 5 of 6 free throws, 15 points in 24 minutes. He had a dunk. Stephen Curry was 11 of 21 for 29 points against the Kings. To me, all these years, you look at LeBron James has been the best player in the league. Kevin Durant has been the second best player in the league. He's got that great jumper. He's improved his defense. He's improved his passing. He actually gets more assists a game over Kawhi Leonard, who, by the way, is probably the most overrated guy on this list because they give him a ton of credit for playing both ends. But Kawhi Leonard, of any of the perimeter players in the NBA, gets the least assists. He's one of those ISO-type players. We say he's an unselfish guy, but he's not really a guy who really drives to the hoop and sets up his teammates. Giannis can do that. Luka can do that. LeBron can do that. Durant can now all of a sudden do it. So I've got Durant at number 2. I've got Stephen Curry at number 3 because he is the lights-out shooter. In the modern-day NBA, great offense beats great defense. So I've got Durant 2. I've got Curry 3. Then 3 through 5, I call them a virtual tie, but for the sake of making picks, I'll go Giannis, Luka, Davis. And then probably 6, 7, I've got like Harden and Kawhi Leonard about the same.
You've lost me now. I'm going to interrupt you. So you're overrating Kawhi. You're saying Kawhi is overrated. Didn't he lead the Toronto Raptors to an NBA championship a couple years ago?
That's a Toronto Raptors team that had a better record in the regular season without him than with him, and a Toronto Raptors team that was also very good this last year without him. And also, there's no way that Kawhi Leonard and the Raptors would have won the championship if the Warriors were healthy. You had Klay Thompson going down in Game 6. They could have won without Durant. Durant got hurt. Even without Durant, Klay Thompson goes down in Game 6 when the Warriors are winning the game. The only reason the Raptors won that title is because the Warriors got hurt. Yes, Kawhi Leonard is a great player, but I don't look at him as a guy that makes his teammates better the same way that Luka does, the same way that Giannis does, the same way that Curry does, the same way that Durant does. Also,
I mean, he just has a different style of play. He's not a drive and kick guy like all the other guys you're naming. He's just a mid-range guy.
But it doesn't work. I want a guy who can run my team and who can do everything. Kawhi Leonard does great on a very good team like the Spurs. But when he's supposed to be your number one guy, yes, he won a championship, but my goodness, it was because the Warriors were hurt. That's what it was.
But he still did it.
That he would have won that championship if the Warriors were hurt. And again, a very good Raptors team. Also, James Harden at number 9. He's won 3 straight NBA scoring titles. I don't know how you put Damian Lillard ahead of Curry or Harden. Lillard was great in the bubble, but you look at his efficiency numbers, he was more efficient this last year, but still not much more efficient than Harden and way less efficient than Curry. Lillard doesn't have the pedigree. He hasn't scored as much consistently as those guys. There is no world that Damian Lillard is better at basketball than Stephen Curry or James Harden.
Well, James Harden, he's very good, but he's not very efficient. I mean, the guy takes 20, 30 shots a game.
I know, and that's the whole point, though. Damian Lillard is not very efficient either, and that's why those guys would be maybe a half step behind Stephen Curry, but Damian Lillard is not a very efficient player, and James Harden gets some credit for getting to the free throw line and getting it done there. So, top 10 list overall, pretty solid. I don't mind where LeBron is, Giannis, Luka, that 3-4 range. I just don't think Durant is 6. I don't think Curry's 8. I don't think Harden is 9. And I don't think Anthony Davis is the second best. But like I said, the difference between number 2 and 9, slim to none. Anthony Davis and James Harden, not that big of a difference to me. So, I do have Davis ahead of Harden, though. But still, I don't have him ahead of Luka, and I don't have him ahead of Giannis. And I think if you were drafting a team just based on not age, I think that you would have Luka Doncic as the first overall pick. You would have Giannis second, and you would have Anthony Davis third, because Luka simply makes his teammates even better than any of those 3 young players. So, Luka Doncic.
I don't want to argue with you there. I mean, it was really fun to see him in the bubble. Really quickly before we move on to Alex, it was really fun to see him in the bubble because that's where I got the most exposure to him, and just his ability to play the game where he's actually more comfortable when he's being guarded, when he can feel like somebody on his hip, because if he knows where a defender's position, he then knows where all of his teammates are. The cerebral nature of his game is really, really fun to see, and it's really fun to see basketball that's not just about pure athleticism, it's about the mental side of the game too. So definitely, an exciting player. I'm looking forward to seeing much more of him going forward.
And he's only going to get better at shooting too. So look out. It's scary. Locks of the week time. So, season records. Kamenechev still in first place. 13 wins, 10 losses, and a tie. Drew is 9-13-2, and Tom is 8-16. Getting back in contention. Finally. He had
That's
a good
funny.
gap. So, by the way, guys, in recent weeks, I seem to either go 1-2 or 3-0. It's like no in between. I had a 1-1 in 1 week earlier in the year, but the last 4 weeks, I rotate between 1-2 and 3-0. So last week I was 1-2. The previous week I was 3-0. So surely this week I should go 3-0, right? That's what it's saying. So last week I hit Washington plus 3.5 versus the 49ers. I missed on the Falcons minus 2.5 versus the Chargers. Matt Ryan going in for the game-winning field goal, throws an interception near midfield. The Chargers instead kick the game-winning field goal. Tom and I both lost that one. I had the Saints covering against the Eagles. That didn't go so well. Drew had Chelsea Everton under an EPL. Of course, he hit in Premier League soccer. He missed on that 49ers Washington game, and then he woefully missed Lexi Thompson making the LPGA top 20. She didn't even.
Yeah, Bryson DeChambeau's caddy didn't have the effect that I thought he would. Just didn't rub off on Lexi. Tough outing for her.
Yeah, Tom was 2-1. I believe that's his best week yet.
Probably.
The Falcons game, he hit the Colts -3 over the Raiders easily, and Cowboys -3.5 over the Bengals. So again, I'm in first place, a little bit over 500. Drew's a little under 500, and Tom is working on it. So this week, we got a fun week ahead. I'm going to mix it up this week a little bit. So I've been going with the 3 NFL picks. I'm going to go with 1 NFL pick game only because I've been so hot with NFL lines. Eventually, you cool off a little bit, and I cooled off last week. So I'm going to cool down a little bit from too much NFL. I will give you one, though, that I really like. Now, I'm not going to do the whole mortgage thing because I'm 13 on picks, but I'm actually 13-8 when I tell you not to bet your mortgage. So no mortgage pick this time. But I do like the Dolphins I'll go -1.5 over the Patriots. I've seen it anywhere from 1 to 2 throughout the day. It's been moving. At one point, it was 2.5. I think, what's the updated? Before the show, it was 1.5. So we'll go with 1.5 on that line. I don't know if you could pull it up and see what it is now. But 8-5 Dolphins holding on to the last playoff spot, the AFC tiebreaker over the Ravens in that wild game that Baltimore. Real quickly, since we didn't talk about the game.
Now up to 3, so maybe you don't want the latest line.
What is it, 3 now?
Now up to 3, so I'm not sure you want it.
I want the Dolphins -3. I'll take the Dolphins -3. Let's call it -2, though, since I had it at -1.5.
You can get it. Yeah, I've also seen 1.5, so you can get it at 1.5. That's acceptable to me.
Okay, 1.5. Drew approves. Fair enough. So 8-5 Dolphins holding that tiebreaker, the last spot against the Ravens, who the Ravens had that crazy win. It was either +3 or +3.5, depending on when you bet for the Browns. They lost that line on the last-second safety. The Ravens win by 5, causing millions of people to lose money on a bad bet. Vegas lost money on it also. That was a crazy game, but you will not be losing money if you bet on the Dolphins. The Patriots simply have no good wide receivers, like literally none at all. Cam Newton can't pass the ball at all, but he has no one to throw to even if he could. So that one-dimensional Patriots offense against that Dolphins defense, I think that's a brutal matchup for the Patriots. I know the Pats beat the Dolphins week 1, but things are much different since then. The Dolphins, they did me bad when I picked them against the Broncos, but they are 10-3 against the spread this year. Look for the Dolphins to win by at least a field goal. College football for my next pick. Again, I'm picking a pick 'em. I have it at -1. It may have moved to -2, but we'll go with -1. Mizzou -1 at Mississippi State. I didn't give the homer pick in our college basketball picks, but I will go homer here. But I do think the Tigers will win. Mizzou 5-4, Mississippi State 2-7. Mizzou's losses to Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. Early loss in the season against Tennessee. New coach, new QB on the road, didn't have their team going. Since that 0-2 start, they're 5-2. They're playing good football. I know they lost to Georgia last week, but Georgia's a good team. Mizzou 5-4, Mississippi State 2-7. Mississippi State beat LSU the first week. Since then, they've only won once by 7 against Vanderbilt, who hasn't won a game. I don't care if it's a road game. Mizzou should win that game and should easily cover -1 or -2, whatever it may be. Final bet of the week, we're going back to some soccer. La Liga Soccer, Spanish Primera Division, Sevilla and Valladolid, over 2 goals, a very low over-under. Yes, I know, Sevilla hasn't scored that much in the league this year, but they are scoring more in the Europa League. They're scoring more in the Copa del Rey. I expect them to score in this game. Champions League race really close in the Spanish League this year. Real Madrid and Barcelona have finally awoken. Atletico Madrid has been great. Real Sociedad is at the top, tied for first. So Sevilla wants to get that Champions League spot. They're going to have to take care of business against some of these weaker teams. I expect Sevilla to get 2 to 3 goals themselves, probably a 3-0, 3-1, 2-1 type of win, and get to over 2 goals against Valladolid, or however you say it.
Don't know how to say it, huh? Does that mean you can bet it if you don't know how to say it?
I watched the team. I watched that league religiously because of Barcelona soccer. It's a complex pronunciation.
Go ahead, Tom.
All right, so kind of keep the work going, trying to get back to 500 first. I've got a couple NFL games and then something a little bit off the beaten path for what I usually put a lock in on. So I will have the Titans covering -11 over the Lions. Latest reports are that Matt Stafford is doubtful to play. Kenny Golladay has been missing in action for pretty much the entire season. And Titans have been playing pretty well. Look for Derrick Henry to have a pretty good game. So I like the Titans over the Lions by that line of -11.
No confidence in Chase Daniel, former Mizzou Tiger.
Legend at the bank. He's a legend at the bank, but not a very good NFL quarterback.
I'm
going to go with a homer pick. I'm going to take the Bears +3 over the Vikings. I think the Bears can win this game outright. It wouldn't be right for me to not take the Bears at some point with everything on the line seemingly for their season and have them crash and burn in spectacular fashion, downing both themselves and me. So I will go with the Chicago Bears. And then there's a little saying from my childhood when I would go to the track with my uncle. It was hot dogs, hot tips, and no playing in the trash. I have a hot tip on a very popular fade when it comes to college basketball. I have heard from a source I consider to be reliable, to always fade the Chicago State Cougars. They're going up against the Northern Illinois Huskies. The line is -16.5. Take the Northern Illinois Huskies to cover 16.5 over Chicago State.
I agree with that. By the way, Scott Van Pelt always has them on bad beats. They seem to always get close. The line is usually like 30, and they lose on the bad beats. I don't know if SVP is your source or someone else, but Chicago State.
It's somebody else, but yeah.
I covered them against Mizzou a couple years ago, or was it last year actually? I'm losing track of years in these crazy times, and Mizzou beat them by like 50 or 60. No defense played by Chicago State. That might be, and I say college basketball is unpredictable, and you don't want to like bet college basketball ever, but that might be the best pick you've made all year, Tom.
Probably, yeah. I've heard that amongst the gambling community, they are in an automatic fade every time a line comes out, and people make a lot of money off of them.
Well, I'm going to the EPL on Saturday. Going back to that well, because it's been a well of gold, I guess, if gold is in wells. But Everton and Arsenal under 2.5 goals in that contest. Moving to Sunday's NFL games. Colts -7.5 over Houston. And then we them boys. Cowboys +3 at home. The live dog against San Francisco. Give me the Cowboys +3 at Jerry World against the Niners.
Real quick, Drew, maybe you should consider picking more English Premier League unders. I feel like maybe I shouldn't say this because you might make a comeback against me, but if you bust out 2 to 3 like unders, you might get back in it, or maybe you think you'll lose the sweet spot if it's too much.
Yeah, you can't go too much because you do have teams that score in that league. It's not like all games are 0-0, so you've got to pick the game and pick it strategically.
Don't want that well to run dry, Drew.
No, if that well runs dry, I'm going to have, I almost picked the golf tournament with the family golf tournament that Tiger Woods and the Thomas family are participating in. I almost went to that well, but elected not to go to that one.
Probably a good decision given how your last golf pick went.
Yeah, it didn't go well, but really need the Australian Open to get going. Unfortunately, it was delayed 3 weeks, so really need that to get going. Get the tennis up and running at the major.
I'd argue with you. I hope they push it back even more because Roger Federer is injured and he's not sure if he'll be able to come back. even with it being pushed back. So the more they push it back, the better chance Roger Federer plays.
I mean, if they continue to push it back, they'll just cancel it.
No, don't cancel. Just give Roger a chance once he can play. Could be his last Australian Open. I hope they push it back. Statement of the week time, salutes, whatever you guys think. Go for it.
Sure, I'll go ahead and get mine out of the way. Well, the NFL doing something really smart here for their playoff game. They are CBS is simulcasting a wild card game on Nickelodeon. So they're trying to reach a younger audience, and honestly, I'm surprised we haven't seen this more with other sports, because you have a target audience that you're trying to hit, and they're trying to expand that audience. And according to this article, their players are going to be covered with digital slime after touchdowns, and you're going to have commentary from the cast of all that during the game. So I think it's a really good idea by I'm assuming it was the NFL, but a really good idea there, and I'd like to see that in other sports to maybe get the younger generation, the younger ages into sports. Doesn't have to be the NFL. It can be college basketball, the NBA. It might even work for college better. You never know, but just a clever idea by the NFL.
Agreed. Tom?
Absolutely, yeah, that's fantastic. I remember seeing that, but it's always good to get different ideas out there, different revenue streams, expand into that pool. I'm surprised that they haven't done something sooner where it's like, no, let's get some of these kids wanting some jerseys for Christmas. Missed out on a bit of a business cycle there. But no, that's a fantastic story. So I have a salute and then a salute that's also a statement. A salute to Florida Gators forward Keontae Johnson, who collapsed during a timeout in the Florida State game this past Saturday. In a harrowing experience, he was at one point in a medically induced coma. But now the great news is that he is awake. He is talking to his family, to his doctors. He's actually, I think, FaceTime his teammates as well. His condition is still critical, but it is stable. So I'm thankful for that, especially because we don't know the cause. They have not determined why he collapsed. It could have something to do with the fact that he did test positive for COVID earlier this year, but at this point, it's too early to say what the results are. So a salute to him for fighting through, and here's to hoping he continues to get better and is able to come back and play basketball, perhaps even at a professional level. Into my statement, years after abandoning the insensitive caricature of Chief Wahoo, the Cleveland baseball team is now in the hunt for a new nickname and mascot. This was the next most offensive indigenous American after the... I'm going to start that again. This is the next most offensive representation of indigenous culture after the Washington football team's slur. And my statement of the week is that other sports franchises should follow suit as quickly as possible. While the Atlanta Braves, Kansas City Chiefs, Florida State Seminoles, and my hometown Chicago Blackhawks have relatively innocuous use of indigenous imagery, now's the time to open up minds and get a little bit creative with different ways that we can celebrate our favorite teams that don't necessarily poke at a culture that has been taken advantage of a lot in American history. Some solutions are going to be trickier than others, but I actually have a couple ideas. The Chicago Hawks actually works as a great name. People already use that as a shortened version of the Chicago Blackhawks. Atlanta used to have a hockey team known as the Thrashers, which is their state bird. I think that'd be a nice touch to a previous sports franchise, and still a really cool name. In Kansas City, they have a mascot, KC Wolf. Go become the Kansas City Wolves. There's a lot of different options out here. Hats off to the Cleveland Indians, or formerly known as the Cleveland Indians. It's going to take a little while to adjust to that. The Cleveland baseball team working on finding a different solution and not digging in their heels as much as the Washington football team did, which is just a really ugly situation scenario. Here's to more teams looking to do the same going forward.
Probably not a bad idea. I will say this. I hope that they come up with an actual nickname, unlike the Washington football team. I do hope the Washington football team does come up with the nickname for next year. My statement of the week is just for you, Contract Castleman, and we're talking loyalty here. Giannis Antetokounmpo signed a 5-year, $228 million deal to play for the Bucks. I believe that's the richest contract in NBA history. Meanwhile, we have James Harden, who's trying to get out of he's got 3 years left on his deal. He's got a player option the third year, so he could leave after 2 years. But he's got 2 more years left on his deal at least. He's trying to get out early, just like Paul George got out early when he signed with the Thunder. And I'm kind of tired of seeing this. I'm tired of seeing these NBA players leave their contracts early. As a player, you have every right to go to whatever team you want to go to. It's your right. I fully believe in free agency. I love it. But these players, if they sign a 4 or 5 year contract, it's going to pay them, $30, $40 million a year. You need to man up. You need to play with your team. You can't whine yourself out of it. So my statement, I've got one for what Houston should do and one for what I'm hopeful Giannis will do. So first off, Houston should not trade James Harden this year. They should stick with him this year because they never know what they're going to get with John Wall and DeMarcus Cousins. Give those guys a try. If the Lakers have an injury or something happens with COVID, the West all of a sudden opens up. They should trade him about a year and a half in if they clearly realize that Harden isn't going to be there long term. Maybe the middle of next year they trade him before they get to the player option. But I think in these trades, oftentimes we see when you trade a star, you just don't get the return for them. And it's very hard for them to get that quality return for James Harden. So I'm hoping that the Rockets show him that you've got to be a man. They stand up to James Harden, and they make him play this year. And I know he's looking fatter. I know he's looking bigger. He's getting jokes on Twitter and everything. But I think ultimately, if they say we're not going to trade you, he's not going to tank. It's not in his interest to tank. Who's going to want him if he tanks? He's already questioned enough by people. Is he a winner? Can he win? Can he deliver? Can he do all this? And if he starts not playing well on purpose, teams are going to hate him even more. So I hope the Rockets hold on to James Harden, and we see this where it's a superstar can't wind themselves out of a deal and get traded because all of a sudden we're not honoring contracts. What's the point of them? I suggest for players and teams both to try and do more two-year type deals. I think it's always good for both sides where there's not a long-term commitment. And my hope is that Giannis does stay all 5 years in Milwaukee with that $228 million deal. He stays true to the city that gave him a chance, and I hope he wins a ring with them, and that's my hope.
Yeah, it's really a messy situation that the Houston Rockets, find themselves in. I think part of it has been really an enabled culture. I read an article earlier today about how pretty much it's whatever James Harden wants, James Harden gets. And there's a little bit of a double standard. He basically said, I don't want Chris Paul, trade Chris Paul. They bring in Russell Westbrook. And Russell Westbrook did not like the culture that he found in Houston, which is part of the reason why he then was shipped off to Washington. I agree. The difficult thing to kind of wrap my head around is how much more agency players have in the NBA than they do in Major League Baseball or the NFL, where they actually kind of sort of have enough leverage to be able to force some of these things, as pleasant as though they seem.
Players run the NBA, and that's how you see these teams. They talk amongst each other. And the reason for that is simply because in the NBA, 1 or 2 players, you can win with them. NFL, MLB, one star doesn't mean much if you don't get a cast around them. That's why the NBA players have more of a voice. But, yeah, I mean, you can't be that way. It's the same case in LA with Paul George. Last year, Doc Rivers gave favoritism to Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. The players didn't like that. Doesn't create a good culture. So that's why it didn't work out there in LA. Also don't like how the Clippers gave Paul George a big deal. We'll see how long before he tries to whine himself out of this one as well. So, anywho, that'll do it for Salute Your Sports Week 10. We'll be back next week. Plenty of more talk. We're going to have our full NBA preview and much, much more. As my dog clearly says, enough is enough. Come play with me. I'm going to go play with my dog. Have a good night, everyone.